Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series here on Apex Racing TV. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the virtual commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall, we have our old buddy Josh Wilkie. And look, I'll be honest, folks, I had a long intro right now talking about the championship and what kind of racing we may have this evening. Tonight, my notes, my fleshed out cold opens and closes, and basically all of that is being thrown out the window. I'll be brutally honest, we have a pack of 5 cars tonight, and pretty much all of the drivers that were in contention for the championship, outside of Gregory Hoveson's teammate Kyle Domark, are not racing here tonight. So pretty much championship, as much as it was a fairly full-on conclusion heading into this race, it's pretty much all but assured that Gregory Hoveson is going to be your Season 3 champion. So this is going to be a lot more of a relaxed broadcast. It's going to be a little bit more of a podcast here from the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series Round 5 here at Mugello. I believe it is the newest track here on the iRacing platform, just introduced for the Season 1 here of 2024. And it's a track that I've owned ever since it came out, because I had to do a officiating for the Rikmatech Touring Car Cup. That was one of the, I believe that was our first race of the season, another series streamed here on Apex Racing TV. But this is actually my first broadcast here at this track. And Charles, I know you just recently bought this track, and by recently, I mean in the past 24 hours. So you've been seeing some of the practice laps here. What do you think of this track so far?
I mean, okay, so I bought it last night after our broadcast, just to be fair. However, I have seen this in other I won't even call them sims, I'll call them video games. So I have ran laps at this track, just not in iRacing. I remember the track from, years past. No, it's another one of those Italian tracks. It's a converted motorcycle track. So you're going to get it's a really flowing track. So you've got a lot of nice winding corners, as you can see here as we're coming through. So not a lot of hard braking zones for these GT3s. It's just going to be, as you see here, this is probably one of the harder braking zones on the track, which would be, if you're on a motorcycle, would be just hard on the brakes. But for the GT3s, it's just a nice, little pump and then a trail brake through and get yourself set for the next straightaway. So it's going to be a fun race to watch. Obviously, I'll be interested to see how the cars how the drivers that are here, perform on the track, and just maybe learn some pointers myself as we're going through the broadcast, of good racing lines and braking points and things like that. So it's going to be, we'll make it fun. Like I said, it will be relaxed, but we'll have a good time with it, and we will, crown our champion at the end of the night. So yeah, it'll still be a good night.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun night, a bit more relaxed. I'm not as tense. I was joking before the broadcast. Usually before these broadcasts, whatever series it may be here on Apex Racing TV, I'm shaking like a leaf. I'm a little bit nervous trying to put on a good show for the viewers watching this and taking time out of their day to watch these streams here on Apex Racing TV. Tonight is a little bit different. I'm not really in my overly exciting voice and doing all that. I don't sound like I'm in a used car commercial or something like that. I'm just talking in my more normal tone than I usually would. And, we're actually in the dying stages of this qualifying session, but I want to touch a little bit on the history of this track. It's fairly new in the world of motorsports. Most people recognize this track as hosting a Formula One race during the COVID year of 2020, a very chaotic race that saw a massive restart crash on the start-finish straightaway there, a little bit of a stack-up, plus I think a 5 or 6 car pileup. That was a very strange crash. Actually had 2 red flags in that race, which was a record until the 2023 Australian Grand Prix. So it was a very interesting race held here by Formula One about 4 years ago. And it's a track that's been open since 1974, but has remained unchanged. The only change to its layout has actually been on the entry to pit road, which these drivers will have to negotiate during this. They do have a pit stop that they have to deal with around the halfway mark of this race. We've seen drivers come in usually around the minute 25 mark is when we see drivers start to come into the pits, and then around minute 35 is when all the drivers are done. I think now with this 5-car field that we have here, it probably won't be very varied when it comes to the strategies, but I think we may have some nice little battling farther back in the field. We're following Kyle Domark in P2. As I said, he is a teammate to Gregory Hovis and your championship points leader right now, and he is leading by a considerable margin, entering this race with a 57-point gap in the championship with a maximum of 35 points available. He basically had one hand grasp on that championship crown heading into tonight's broadcast, but considering, look, I mean, we only have 5 cars, he is not going to be able to be usurped with that championship lead in any stretch of the imagination. So we'll touch on that in a little bit and crown him the official champion later on in this broadcast, but it's looking very good for him to grab another pole position. That's a massive gap between himself and his teammate. 1.9, actually, no, not 1.9, 1.1 seconds. My apologies here. Still pretty big gap, though, between himself and his teammate in P2.
Yeah, that's a big gap, considering that the P2 and 3 is 200ths of a second, and then another 10th and a half back to P4. So yeah, it's he's pretty much got it locked up. He's obviously he's been obviously the best driver on the grid, the entire season, and it's no surprise he's out there as we're watching him just having a little fun, getting some one last lap in before qualifying's over. I did notice that that Lambo, as he was practicing, does not like those sausage curbs that are in some of these corners. You see there, he did have a couple of spins during the course of that. You see the car just kind of bounce over those. So that is something we'll have to watch out for. I mean, it's not like a foregone conclusion he's going to win the race because, stranger things have happened. But, it's, even if he finishes 5th, he's pretty much got the championship sewn up. But, these guys are out here. They want to race. They're going to try and race hard. And, we'll see who comes out on top.
And I'll tell you, a driver that is really impressing me. He is in the midfield of this. He's currently in P3 in this qualifying session, and that is Newman. You can see him there in the only Porsche in the field. A newcomer to this series is the P3 qualifier of Jonathan Newman, a driver, as I said, new to this series in that Porsche. So we'll see what he can do from the 3rd place starting position here. We have a little bit of time before we get to the start of this race. You can see the nice little helmet there at the entry to this track, a nice little unique part of the circuit. I remember seeing this circuit for the first time, I think, in the old Forza Motorsports 4 game, playing that as a very young lad back in the days when I was in elementary school, and then seeing this track. And it was one of the Top Gear Perfect Road Trip little shows that they did, one of the little specials they did for that show back before the original Holy Trinity of the trio they had there was fired. So it's a track that I know from various sources that people are a little bit more familiar with ever since F1 raced here a few years ago, but still wonderful circuit with a lot of flow. And I'm sure the other 5 drivers here on track tonight are really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. And I did. I am watching the YouTube chat as we're talking about it. And hello to Brendan Kennedy for popping in. Sammy Hendricks posted that Mr. Jonathan Newman is his teammate in the IRTES series, and so this is a team battle here to see who's going to come out on top between the Porsche or the new Audi. So we'll it's that little internal battle that gives somebody some bragging rights at the end of the race.
Now, Sammy Hendricks here mentioning the IRTES, and I was actually able to cover that series with our producer Josh this past weekend. That was on Sunday. That's a 5-hour-long broadcast. My brain cells were basically completely fried after that. We're going to get the starting grid. That's a good thing we have a whole formation lap to get through all of this. And it's going to be Gregory Hoveson. Well, 5 cars. Gregory Hoveson at the front. Kyle Domark there in second. Jonathan Newman in third. Sammy Hendricks in fourth. And Spencer Retsma starting this race in P5. And then the rest of the field, for some reason, is not loading right now. It's a little bit different compared to the Ray Esports broadcast that we did last night here on Apex Racing TV, where I basically had to run through the starting grid for both of those races as if I was an auctioneer trying to sell cattle in the middle of Iowa. Unlike that, we have a much shorter field, much more relaxed race here. So usually for broadcast, our beverages of choice are water to keep our vocal cavities kind of moistened and ready to go so we don't snap our vocal cords in half. This is a little bit different. I actually have a Schweppes ginger ale. Of course, Apex Racing TV is not sponsored by Schweppes or associated with the people that make Schweppes ginger ale in the slightest, but it is a very nice beverage. I cracked this open for dinner about, I'm going to say 2 hours ago. Actually, a little bit less than that. Had a little bit of a late dinner this evening, so it's a nice little beverage. Don't have too many sips of it left. Thankfully, I've got my trusty glass of water. So I think, do you just have some water with you there, Charles, or do you have something else?
No, it's just water, but I do, as a matter of fact, have some ginger ale of the same brand in my cupboard. So there may be some browner liquid go into that after this race is over with. So we'll see if Mr. John Daniels makes an arrival post race, obviously, because we're not going to do that while we're calling the race, and we're going to watch this as we're on our pacing lap here, getting ready for the start.
Yeah, we cannot condone or condemn drinking at work, so we'll just touch on that. I will say one thing I think I may do. My dad always says that he reminds me of one of his old friends who had a collection of Yankee candles in her house. I have, oh God, I think it's, let me do 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. I have 16 3-wick candles that I've purchased from Bath and Body Works over the past year-ish. So I think I'm going to light one of them. I'm going to go with crushed candy cane. I think I lit this once, so we're going to try. This is the first. I think this is broadcasting history here, folks. We are lighting a candle on live. Yeah. Fingers crossed I don't light my pop filter on my microphone on fire, but I'm going to do this very close to the microphone just so you can actually hear. There we go. We have fire, folks.
Yeah, I was gonna say
caveman reaction.
If the next hour is just me talking, you know that that Ron has set his house on fire.
Yeah.
So hey, Mr. I think I'm gonna guess that's Mr. Attrell in the chat as well. Yeah, we're gonna call the race. We're gonna give it the proper treatment, and we're gonna have some fun with it along the way. We'll do you proud. I promise.
Yeah, we are here for a good time, and I think we have some good racing ahead of us, even though we have a smaller field. I have a good feeling that we are going to see some hard battling. We are hearing a little bit of, I wouldn't say smack talking, but we saw Sammy Hendricks saying that he was going to battle with his teammate, the newcomer here to this series, so we might see some inter-team mingling there with Spencer Retsma in the Ferrari, who was he was the second driver in the session. He was registered, but he wasn't in the session when I joined the league session here in iRacing a little bit earlier on this evening. So we're heading through the turn 13 and 14 section. We'll go through some of the corner names because I was kind of dreading going through this. My sister-in-law is Italian and she does not watch my broadcasts here on Apex Racing TV. She's got to because she has much better things to do with her time. But I feel like she will be very annoyed at me if she heard my pronunciations of some of these corner names later on in this broadcast. We'll have to touch on that once we get towards the halfway mark of this race. But the drivers are going to head their way around the final corner now. The crushed candy cane smell from my candles already hitting me now, as is the action that will be heading us here in a few moments' time. Turn 1 is going to be I think that's going to be the main overtaking opportunity for all the drivers here tonight, but you never know what will happen through the very tight, twisty section that the rest of this track is. So the field is now in the hands of Gregory Hovison. He's going to wait to grab the green flag here in just a few moments' time, listening very closely to the sound of that beautiful Lamborghini engine in this GT3 car. He has gunned it, and he is on his way into turn 1. It's a pretty even keel start there from your front row sitter. A pretty good, pretty even keel start for the driver starting farther behind. So I think we're having some action here farther in the back. The two Delta Sport teammates are going side by side. I will say a few weeks ago, I think it was at Daytona, they were talking about how they're just battling to put on a good show for the broadcast, which we do appreciate. But it is Gregory Hovison taking the punch early on and grabbing the lead from his teammate. Meanwhile, the battling continues with Spencer Retzma there at the tail end of the field. You've got Sammy Hendricks in the middle there in that, actually no, farther up the road now in that Audi, and you actually have the newcomer to the series getting swallowed up by Spencer Retzman. They're going side by side here, heading into the next corner. A little bit of contact, I think, before they enter the corner, but they managed to get through cleanly. So far, it's been very clean for all these drivers. And yeah, a little bit, well, you can't really expect it was going to be a dirty start, but nice, some solid racing thus far.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the field, that's, with the exception of Hopeson, who's, kind of as far as iRacing is concerned, got a pretty good lead off of everybody, but it's a pretty even field. So, theoretically, and we've got, 4 different car manufacturers out of the 5 drivers that we've got. Only the 2 teammates up front are running the same car. So it should be interesting as far as, just which cars are going to perform better on which parts of the circuit. So if you're really curious about iRacing and you want to know which car should I pick, you'll get a nice long straightaway and you'll see which car kind of pushes a little forward, and then you'll get the twisty bits, and so you'll see, oh well, maybe the Porsche handles that pretty well, and so it'll be interesting, battle and comparison of cars during the race.
I think we're in for some nice strategic racing. It's something we always come to expect here in GT3 racing. It's nice to have a nice wide variety of different cars with their own little unique quirks, flares, and features here. So it's nice to have a small little sampling size. You got 4 different manufacturers being represented across 5 different drivers. And right now, it's not the best start for the newcomer Newman. He's actually dropped back off of Spencer Retzma there in P4, so maybe he's just trying to take it a little bit easy at the start, saving up his tires, and he may try and push it a little bit more as we enter the later stages of this race. We're on lap 2 now, 2 minutes and 43 now, 2 minutes and 45 seconds in to this race, heading through a very tough sequence here, coming through turn 9, which is a fun corner if you get right. Turn 10, this is always a very tricky corner for me, a very tricky section, period. You got that crest exiting the corner where the back end of the car could get a little bit light. I was seeing some drivers adding a little bit of counter steer action going through there, running over the curbs. Those anti-cut, I guess, are they called sausage curbs, croissant curbs? What would they be called in Italy? Breadstick curbs?
We'll call them salami curbs.
Salami curbs. There we go.
Yeah. So it's what we'll call those. And yeah, it's these cars. Some of the cars react better to those curbs than others. Seems like the Porsche did okay through there as we watched him really explore the track limits. The Ferrari seems like it normally does a pretty good job. The Audi, I still, even, I've watched we watched this series and I've watched a few other races. The Audi still has that tendency to want to bite you at some point in time during a race. It just does something, but it's got, obviously you can see see the straight line speed of the Ferrari just pulling up beside. The Ferrari always really does well in slipstream, especially at an Italian racetrack. For whatever reason, the Ferraris always do well at Monza and Imola, and it appears like it's going to be the same at Mugello.
Ooh, they're still going side by side, heading through turns 2 and 3, about to enter the next chicane section of 4 and 5. Spencer Retsma is there on the inside and is actually going to pull off that move there on his adversary of Hendricks there. So Hendricks dropping down into P4 outside of the podium. That podium fight is going to be the one that we need to keep our eyes on. The two Delta Sport drivers are now pulling ahead. Hovesen and Dilmark have about a half a second separating the two of them, and then about 2.5 seconds between themselves and Retsma there in P3. So they're slowly extending their gap a little bit. They'll probably be on their phones in a few moments time, but I think the next time they come by and start a lap, I think we'll start on the butchering of Italian names there. About to enter turn number 12, which is, let me pull this up here. I have the track map that I'm having to inflate the size of in OBS. That is Correnteo. It is spelled Correntao. So I think
that's
Correnteo there.
That's as close as I could get with it. I mean, you know, I sometimes just struggle with English, so Italian is not going to be great for me. I promise.
I've never related to a quote more there, Charles. I struggle with English myself. Actually, a little bit of transparency, folks. We do all these streams here. Well, we do them on Apex Racing TV with some nice software to stream all of it. And of course, iRacing, a wonderful racing simulator. But to actually communicate with each other, we just use plain old Discord. So here in Discord, you can actually change your bio. And I actually did that earlier this evening. I changed it to... try and pull it up real quick if I can do that without disconnecting. I changed it, changed my biography here in Discord to Apex Racing TV's resident redheaded loudmouth there. So I think it was originally just words and nothing else, just the word words and then nothing else. So I think a little bit of an upgrade there. My biography game here on Discord is getting a little bit stronger, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, that's actually a. I didn't know you were a redhead, actually, to be fair. But yeah, I think everything else applied. I kind of figured that one out. But yeah, so as we're watching in here, it just seems like Hovesen, you know, we saw this a couple of weeks ago in the last race. Seems like Dilmark does a really good job of just kind of hanging in that 1 second inside the slipstream. And then, you know, as we get closer to the pit cycle, Hovesen just decides oh, you know what? Okay, it's time to race now, and he just pulls a 2 second gap. I don't know that that's going to happen tonight because it is a new track. So, you know, even the guys that are out here have probably had some practice, but it's not like we've been running this. It's not like we're at Watkins Glen and we've been running this, you know, thousands and thousands of laps on this track. So it's still fairly new for everybody. So I'm sure that there's still a little bit of learning going on, even while they're out there racing.
So I think I may have to post some kind of proof that I'm a redhead in the small little communication channel that we have here. Let me find some photo on my phone. You will, with seeing a photo of me, you'll realize that I am both a redhead and look like some kind of homeless alcoholics. So we are starting P5, not P5, we're starting lap 5 of this race. Newman is still running in P5, dropping back a little bit yet again of Hendricks in P4. We're following the front two of we're following the front two of the Delta Sport teammates. Newman is still within a fairly close shot. I mean, it's still not a big gap that he has thereabouts. Ooh, let me do some quick math here real quick. That'd be 1.2 seconds that he has. Actually, a little bit less now. It's teetering around that 1.2 second barrier. So he is still in that slipstream, which plays a massive role going down that very long start-finish straightaway. Really, it's the only straightaway you could say on this entire circuit, because the only one that's really close to it in length is probably the stretch between turns 5 and actually no, not turns 5 and 6. That's still a pretty long straightaway, probably the third longest on this track. But between turns 3 and 4, that's probably the second longest here. So not a whole lot of opportunities for these drivers to really let their cars stretch their legs a little bit, be able to take their hands off the steering wheel a little bit, drive with their knees, send some whatever text messages they may have to send throughout this race. So not a whole lot of chances for these drivers to break, which is a little bit different than some of the other tracks that we visited this season, and much different than we'll be seeing at Bathurst in 2 weeks' time to round off this season. That'll be those two big straightaways, Conrad Straight, and the name of the straightaway after turn 1 is escaping me right now, but we do have those two long straightaways on that track. So there's a little bit of a it sticks out a little bit. I wouldn't say like a sore thumb because it's still a wonderful track, but it sticks out a little bit compared to the other ones just in how the track is designed.
Yeah, it's this long front straight kind of reminds you of Fuji a bit, where it's basically the dominant, straightaway, and it's one of the most prominent features on the track. As we see Newman starting to close up that gap, he's got it down to about half a second. So I think where the Porsche struggles is obviously the straight line speed. I don't think it has quite the legs that the other cars do. But I think where he's going to make up some time is on the pit stop, because I think it does a much better job of fuel economy. So we may look to see him capitalize on that as he's going through. I don't know that anybody's out here doing any fuel saving, but if he was, that's even a bigger benefit. So yeah, it's this, they don't have a lot of time here, but no, it's nothing like Bathurst, because Bathurst, you have to be alert, period, from the drop of the green to the drop of the checker. It's there's not a lot of room for error there.
Yeah, it has, well, I guess it would be technically a street circuit, Bathurst would be, because it is actually public roads that they do race on at that track. Of course, it is more of a racetrack because you do have some gravel and some asphalt runoff area in certain parts, but it is still an actual street circuit technically, in the same way that Sochi Autodrome, that hosted the Russian Grand Prix not too long ago, is technically a street circuit, even though I think 2/3 of it, they say, actually no, I think it's actually 1/3 of the track is actually on public roads. Same can't be said about the Miami Grand Prix. I think there's only one actual road that they drive on in that entire track. So I guess the F1 philosophy of making street circuits nowadays, hey, if you don't have streets, actually build a nice street track on, just make some for your own. So yeah, this I will say Bathurst is still a wonderful track, one of my favorites on the iRacing platform. It's a beautiful track, has a lot of history around it too. That's one thing you can say about a lot of the tracks that we visited, whether it be Daytona a few weeks ago, whether it be Suzuka that we visited last time at 2 weeks ago, or whether it be Mugello this time at. A lot of historic tracks that we have here in the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, and Mugello is no different. As you said, a little bit of a history with motorcycles, but the cars seem to be racing on them quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a good car track. I'm not gonna sit here and say bad things about it. Obviously, these guys are doing a great job. They've got some nice gaps in between them now. They can go run some hot laps, and so yeah, it's a good track. It's not it's not I don't know if I would say it's the best track, but it's different than the other tracks we have. It's its own features. But it's something new, and once again, it's kind of a little bit of a learning curve for everybody out here, as well as us, because as we both talked about, this is kind of our first time seeing it with live racing action in iRacing. So it's so anytime we get a new track, it's always a good thing, right? So I'm always a fan of getting new cars and tracks out there, and so it's all good.
I don't really have any relevant experience when it comes to other iRaces at this track. The only other iRace that I've seen that wasn't AI involved or just a broadcast that someone else was doing was actually, it was the Rick Mattek Touring Car Cup when I was doing the officiating for that series not very long ago, but that is an entirely different series, unlike the World Challenge where they're running in prototypes and also in GT3 machinery. In that series, they're running in the MX-5s and the Toyota GR86s, so it's completely different than the style of racing that we have here, but it's still converting quite similarly. That race was a little bit more of a race where people were just trying to hit their marks, keep it on the road, even though this track is up to FIA Grade 1 certification. You still still don't have much room. There's still very little margin for error at a track like this. Not a whole lot of asphalt runoff area to speak of in certain parts of the track, and the runoff area that you do have is primarily gravel with the reworked physics that they have here in iRacing that they introduced not very long ago. You hit that gravel and it's basically like you just dropped an anchor straight into the ground. So these drivers will try not to make any sort of mistakes and try and avoid that gravel as close as they can. Actually, I think that was Kyle Domark. That was very close, getting a little bit flirtatious with that gravel there. So it's a nice little track that we have here. I think it's a very pretty track as well. You have that the red, white, and green curbs. You've got the gravel runoff, which, even though, as I said, it may not be a driver's best friend, from my perspective, it's a lot more visually appealing than looking at some tracks nowadays that just have those massive, expansive, painted asphalt runoff areas. I'm looking at you, Paul Ricard, that hosted the French Grand Prix not very long ago. It's nice to have a track with a little bit of more flair and, of course, scenery just around this track. Being in Italy, in wine country pretty much, it is a beautiful track as we see the mountains right there on the outskirts of Turn 1.
Yeah, the Italians, they're going to make it pretty, if nothing else, right? So they're going to add the red, white, and green, the Italian flag, just prominent all over the place. And yeah, it's a very pretty area. And my experience being in Italy has been limited to about 2 hours to Rome Airport, waiting to get the plane filled up to go to the next destination. So, but it is one of those. It's one of those bucket list items, right? Is you have to go tour Italy at least once if you like to travel, and I do. So, probably not this year. I think this year is for me is going to be Germany and the Nürburgring. So obviously quite a bit different than the mountains of Italy, but still going to be a fun event nonetheless. So. Yeah, it's one of those that it'll be nice to go see this live and in person one of these days.
Yeah, fingers crossed Formula One returns here someday. I know there's been some discussion, especially in the F1 fan base, of people saying, oh yeah, bring back Mugello. It's a track that, if I'm being brutally honest, did not put on the greatest race in the world when Formula One visited there, albeit I say that Formula One visiting a racetrack really isn't the biggest indictment of the racing quality, especially during the Mercedes dominance period of 2020. So I think it's still a wonderful track, puts on some decent racing. And I think if we had a more full field, I think we'd see a lot of side-by-side action here, but still a very nice track. Italy, I haven't visited any other country outside the United States. I'm trying to go through my head. I think I have visited about 14 U.S. states, if I'm not mistaken. So haven't even gone up to Canada. Maybe I'll have to do that someday, go up into, I guess it would be Ontario. That's the closest to me. Maybe it goes to Toronto. We were talking about this during the Ray Esports broadcast last night, how Mid-Ohio is one of the closest IndyCar tracks to me in the city of Philadelphia, which is, I think, the 5th largest city in the entire country of the U.S., has a population of about, I think, 2 million people, if not a little bit under that. It's a massive population of people, but despite that, the closest IndyCar race to me is 10 hours away, which is so frustrating. It's so irritating to deal with, doubly so considering I don't really talk about this too much, but outside of my broadcasting here with Apex Racing TV, I do love IndyCar-related content on my own personal YouTube channel. I will not touch on that anymore because last time I did, it was some driver coming in for an interview on a Radical race. They mentioned that, and I got very embarrassed and started blushing on air, so we will just avoid that with a 10-foot pole, but it's very frustrating, the fact that closest IndyCar race to me, I'd be better off going to Toronto, Canada, than actually going to the next state to me, Pennsylvania and Ohio, right next to each other. But Pennsylvania is a massive state, and driving through Pennsylvania, it takes like 6 hours to get from one side to the other. It's quite fitting that we do have Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, the home of Groundhog Day, because driving through Pennsylvania, it is very much like Groundhog Day. So this is a completely unrelated discussion here, Charles, but what is the most monotonous state that you've ever had to drive through of the lower 48?
That's a good question. So I haven't really been out west, but I drove through. I think there's, for me, every state has its own has its own, quirks and, its own personality. I think my most recent trip was to Florida, and it's basically, I think the highest point of elevation in Florida is 110 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
So, if you want to talk about a place that's just basically, flat to underwater, that would be Florida. So yeah, it's like I said, every state. The trip before that, I think I drove to St. Louis, so that was a very nice drive through Tennessee and Kentucky and into Missouri. I really enjoyed that. I even cut through Illinois there for just a brief minute. So I've got about, I think, somewhere close to half of the states under my belt. But I've kind of, I'm at a point in my life now that it's we're going to get on the airplane and go somewhere. So seven or eight countries in, and hopefully Germany will be a return visit. I've already been there once, so but they'll still be fun though.
Yeah, Germany is a very nice country, and I'm definitely not saying that because my heritage comes from there, and I guess I'm like somewhat obliged to say that. But I'm just trying to go through my memory and think of some of the states that I've driven through or have been in a car driving through. As a member of the SDCA, the Sports Car Club of America, and in the autocross side of things, I like how we're talking about the SDCA a day after the unofficial SDCA broadcast for the Ray Sports Racing League last night. Being a member of the Sports Car Club of America, we have a spin for the newcomer, John Newman, not having a very good race already. He was running farther in the back, and sadly, he's spun out of that fifth position as well, still in fifth. So he's just spun and had lost quite a lot of time. We're looking at a replay. Is heading through the final corner, which feels like it takes forever. I was showing my dad around this track a little bit before the broadcast, and it's about a 210-degree corner. And sadly, Jonathan Newman, I think, goes for, I'm thinking that would be about 165-degree spin there, heading through the corner. So add the 210 or 220, whatever number I said before then, to the 165. So you have a complete 360 and a little bit more there. So Jonathan Newman not having the best race in the world, the driver, the number 3. I would like to see him come back with a much bigger field. He is a newcomer to this series, and it's nice to have some new faces to talk about, but he is not having the best race in the world, 18.8 seconds back of Hovesen right now.
Yeah, that's we call that Porsche doing Porsche things. It's the the weight distribution on the Porsche is better than it was. It's still not great if you get, as he was, on that downhill braking zone. If you give it too much input in the steering wheel, you have a tendency to lose the rear of the car. And that's what happened. I've seen that spin about 7 billion times since the Porsche 911 has been upgraded. So it's nothing new. Still hate to see it because, obviously, just him being out here is helping us as we can watch him around the track and we can see the Porsche going around Mugello. We'll hope he comes back and we get a bigger field for next week. Maybe the field's down just because it is a new track and maybe people did not want to make the investment in purchasing it in order to race it. So maybe we'll come back next week. I think everybody will be interested in driving Bathurst since it is our next big road event in iRacing, the big special event coming up, the 12 hours. So I'm sure everybody will want to get some track time against live competition, just to kind of get maybe a leg up on their competition for the endurance event.
You get just a little bit of more seat time behind the wheel before that very special race, the Bathurst 12-hour here in iRacing. If you'd like to tune into that broadcast next time out for the not the Ray Sports Racing League, for the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, you can tune in on February 21st at 9:10 Eastern, 6:10 Pacific. If you want to tune into the Ray Sports Racing League, you can tune in at 9 p.m. on Tuesdays, every Tuesday. Actually coming towards the end of that series season in a few weeks' time, so that'll be a nice little close to that season as well. So we're reaching the end now of the first stint. I think we may see some drivers come in here in the not too distant future. We're 23 minutes into this race already, but I think before we see some pit stops, we'll continue on the discussion of very monotonous states to drive through. Because I was thinking about, I've driven through more states than I originally thought. being in the city of Philadelphia, I try and avoid I-95 and Route 1, which is like the two biggest interstate slash like highways going through the city of Philadelphia, and it is basically like it is a madhouse driving on those roads. So it's not really a section that I really want to drive on. Actually, it came in the news back in the summer because the section of I-95 right by my house, the closest way to get on to I-95, the bridge actually collapsed after a tanker truck crashed and caught on fire and burnt the metal support beams on that part of the road. But even though I don't want to drive on that bit of the road that's like miles away, like minutes away from my house, it's like a 5-minute walk basically to get to those roads, I will still gladly drive all the way out to Nebraska this past fall, back in, I'm trying to think now, it was September. I drove to support my buddy Robbie, who was running in the Stars Championship Series karting event just outside of Cincinnati. Drove all the way out there from Philadelphia to Cincinnati, and I'll tell you what, having driven through the state of Ohio, it's like driving through, I wouldn't say a war zone, but it's like driving through the Chernobyl exclusion zone in a way. It's like towards the end of summer where the weather is starting to get a little bit cold in the Great Lakes region. It's just like all the it's just basically the entirety of Interstate 80 coming through the state of Iowa. All the trees around it are just basically dead twigs and mud. So it's not really the most appealing state to drive through during the fall. I can't even imagine how it is during the winter. Fingers crossed I'll have to go through Ohio on I-80 during the winter, because I'd probably fall asleep behind the wheel and cause like a 16-car accident. Maybe that's the reason why there's those many winter accidents, especially going through Pennsylvania on I-80, which is not a very fun road. It's not the most visually appealing in the world. It takes a driver that's been on there like 8 or 9 times at this point in my life to know how boring it is. Also, going through Interstate 80, I've mentioned Interstate 80 about 19 times already in the past about 10 seconds, but going through there in the state of Iowa, it's an interesting experience. You see the children of the corn going through there. You have probably about like 5 villages that you drive past. Otherwise, it's just corn and soybean fields and occasional dirt roads, which strum up a little bit of excitement, because you'll be going there in whatever car it may be, your Honda Civic or whatever car you're driving there, going through Interstate 80, and you're going at a steady pace. The speed limit's 80. You're probably going about 88, trying not to get caught by any of the speed cameras that they have there. Speak from experience, but you're just going there minding your own business, going about 88 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you see some random yahoo in a pickup truck buzzing by you on a dirt road running accordance with I-80. It takes a very talented driver. I'm not sure if any of the drivers in this race here could drive on a dirt road in the middle of Iowa in some raggedy pickup truck, overtaking cars that are going 88 miles an hour on a major interstate right next to it. That is a nice little feature of driving through Iowa. So if any of the viewers ever have that experience, they may be able to relate to that after driving through Iowa. I think, Charles, are you there? I think we'll continue on the discussion of very strange people. Oh, there, I think Charles, are you back?
I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, just a little bit of a cough there. Had to take care of. No, I was going to say that, are you saying that you were on a road course right next to a rally circuit? Is that what that was?
It basically seemed like it was. It was like a scene from like Mr. Bean, like if Mr. Bean made his way onto a Formula 1 track and was driving around in that green Mini Cooper with a black hood and just overtook Formula 1 cars. That's basically what it felt like, driving there being like, oh yeah, I'm very close to the speed limit, and then you just see a massive plume of dust and like, I don't know, like whatever may be on the dirt roads alongside the interstate in Iowa, like, I don't know, like 1930s asbestos or something like that being kicked up into the air, and just seeing that massive plume of dust covering the road as these guys buzz by in their like 1992 Ford F-150 that probably hasn't seen the inside of a like normal garage outside, this guy just working on his own backyard since about 1996 or something ridiculous like that. It's always a wonderful sight to see that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up rural, so yeah, that was, you basically you're talking about my childhood, except subtract 20 years from the model of the truck, you know. But we're sitting here looking at it, and that Kyle Dunbar's doing a pretty good job of just kind of hanging with Greg here. It's he's kept it within that right around that 1 second time gap. Retsman's doing a really good job, 2.5 seconds back. So we'll see if once we get into the pit cycle here, which should be in the next just any minute now. We'll see if anybody has any special pit strategy they're going to use, and maybe changes the result of this race.
Oh no, we may see some interesting track limit strategies, because with this full layout of Mugello, there is a short layout that some people aren't aware of that you can actually drive even though you're running on the full circuit. I think if we try and finagle the camera angles here, maybe right on board with one of the drivers heading through the turn 6 and 7 section, very quick corner section there towards the end of this opening sector of the lap, you can actually see there's a little bit of a shortcut that you can take to spit your way back onto the start-finish straightaway. So we're riding on board with Kyle Domark about to enter turn 6. If you look very closely into the runoff area, I think you can see there an open space. So maybe if you're Newman running farther back, he is just about to enter turn 4 here. So he is about 22 seconds back of the leaders right now. Maybe he could do something like that and just make up the time and just start lapping the field. Obviously, iRacing would say just no, they would not allow you to do that under any stretch of the imagination. But I think that would really spice up this race. If we had the ability just to clear people's black flags and allow them to run whatever layout they want. Maybe do what they do in Rallycross and just say, like, okay, you can run the short layout as your joker lap, but you only have to do it one time. So maybe that's a nice little thing that could spice up this race here. Of course, the pit stops may do that in a few moments' time. I think we may see him come in this time by. What do you think? Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be pretty close, right? Because they're limited on fuel, and I think the latest we've seen them is 35 minutes. I think maybe at Daytona where they could do a lot of fuel saving, as we see Domark coming into the pits now. He's going to try and undercut Hoveson, and Retsman's coming in with him.
Honestly, every time that we've thought that Kyle Domark is going to do a different strategy to his teammate, he does end up doing it, and then he just comes at like 5 or like 15 seconds behind his teammate, much farther back. It seems like Gregory Hoveson has some kind of strange ability to do that. Actually, I say that is actually, no, that's another driver further up the road. We're riding on board with Sammy Hendricks. I saw a Lamborghini there, and that was Domark there in his pit box. He's already exited there, so fairly quick pit stops from all these drivers. I don't think they're going to be risking it on fuel, because really it's not really the smartest decision to risk it on gas in a race with only 5 cars. So all those drivers, not really some strange strategies from all of them. I think Domark taking a little bit less fuel there for the 41 seconds it took him to go through pit lane. I think the main reason why that was the case is he was just in the drift of his teammate all throughout that first stint, so he was able to get a little bit better fuel mileage. But as I said, every time we've thought that Kyle Domark will pull a different strategy and cut ahead of his teammate, Gregory Hoveson always finds a way to extend that gap even more. So who knows? Maybe by the time Gregory Hoveson comes out and exits with the lead, he'll be like 2 laps ahead of the field. Who knows?
you never can tell. But yeah, it's he like I said earlier, he's got that ability to kind of flip that switch and just really put down a hot lap that's a half second to a second faster than what he's been running the entire race. It's a good quality to have if you have that ability. I don't. So we'll see when he comes in how much longer his pit stop is going to be as he's coming in now. Obviously, he was out front, so I don't know how hard he was pushing during the course of that. So I don't know if he's managed to save any fuel or not. So we'll see his versus Domark's pit time and see if that changes the order once his pit's over.
Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Gregory Hoverson does stream his perspective from these races on his own personal Twitch account. So maybe if I can go through here, I'll double check to see if he's actually streaming his perspective of this race. But maybe someone could go in there in his Twitch live stream and donate like $30 to say, hey, intentionally through this race, crash it into the barrier, and give us an interesting finish for this $30. He's exited the pits, and I think it's a pretty big, yeah, you can see massive gap. Gregory Hoverson, this man is on like iRacing steroids. It is ridiculous. A 10.3 seconds, much shorter pit stop than everyone else in the field. Even Newman there at the tail end of the field was only stopped for 10.8. So you could see Hoverson cutting time even in the pit stops. This man is absolutely unstoppable, has a pretty big gap between himself and his teammate there. So I think between now and the finish, we don't have long until then. It's going to be about 11 minutes between now and the end of this race. Still about a 2-second gap separating the two Delta Sport teammates. We're probably not going to see some racing between the two of them, considering the championship scenario that Hoverson will very much likely lock up the championship here when he takes the checkered flag in just a few moments' time. I don't think we'll see some action flare up between the two of them, so I think we could go back to talking about some random stuff. So, Charles, what would you like to talk about now?
Oh no, I just it's just, you know, my day has been so long and drawn out that I really I'd really just rather stick to the race. But I will say this. You know, it's pretty amazing what Host has been able to do. He basically led from the start of the race and still managed to fuel save it and come in and take a shorter pit stop than his teammate, who basically was riding his draft the entire time. That's pretty special. And, you know, so hats off to him for, you know, and hats off to him for running the endurance lots first. And then, you know, and then my hats off to just the job he's done the entire season. It's been amazing to watch him on track, and just some of the things he does has been pretty incredible.
Yeah, he has just been mightily impressive. Going through all the broadcasts that we've done of this series ever since it started back in, I think it was September 13th of 2023, 10 broadcasts we've done of the series, and Gregory Hoverson he's won all but one of them. The only driver that's beat him to the checkered flag is his teammate Kyle Domark, who won the season finale race during Season 2 of the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series. That was the season finale at Watkins Glen. Thanks to a little bit of team orders, if we're being brutally honest, to let Kyle Domark move into P2 in the championship. Speaking of, he will very much move into that spot here with this race. He is about 5 points behind Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, who was P2 in the championship. Of course, him not showing up tonight, that's going to give Domark P2 in the standings. So I think it's looking very good for Delta Sport to take another 1-2 in this race, and probably another 1-2 in the championship. Of course, everything can happen between now and the end. We do have drop scores for these drivers to negotiate, but still fairly full-on conclusion. That's looking once again very good for Delta Sport. They've been the dominant force all throughout the season. Domark is I guess he's the kind of dead giveaway choice, you could say, when it comes to picking who would finish P2 in the championship. I think we said at the start of the Suzuka race 2 weeks ago that it was a little bit up in the air about who may finish second in the championship, because we just hadn't seen any driver to really stake their claim on that position. Domark, in the races that he did do, was finishing well, but I will say last time out in Suzuka, he was running farther back, had a few mistakes that dropped him down the field. He ended up finishing that race off the podium. So Domark finishing in P2 in this race. He may not actually finish in P2 because that gap has decreased massively between himself and Gregory Hoverson. What I will do, though, is I'm going to pull up Gregory Hoverson's live stream, and if they're talking about what they did during the Daytona race, I was listening in to that broadcast that that stream that Gregory Hoverson did. It was essentially just talking with Kyle Domark, saying, wouldn't it be funny if we decide to mock race each other just to see how they would react on the broadcast? I would not be too shocked if there may be some similar things. Maybe we'll see what Ferrari did at the end of Indianapolis in 2002. I think it was a U.S. Grand Prix in 2002, when they went side by side across the line, were separated by, I think, 11 hundredths of a second at the end of that race. Maybe we may see kind of a repeat of that from the two Delta Sport teammates here.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the really, you just obviously have to follow the first rule of racing, which is don't wreck your teammate. So I think what they were doing at Daytona was they did get a little touchy there, and so hopefully they'll not have that same thing happen again. They obviously didn't wreck, but it was they had a couple of close calls. We'll say it like that. So it'd be nice to see them go a little scrap here for a lap or two at the end of the race and see what Domark's got. But my feeling is that Hovesen basically is far and away the faster of the two drivers. Domark's done a really good job against the rest of the field. As you said earlier, has been running up in the top. He had the one bad race. So if we get everybody back next week, which I kind of feel like we'll have a nice field for Bathurst, we talked about that earlier, then it may be a nice battle for P2 between him and Barrera and maybe a couple of the other drivers. You just never know, because I think it was fairly close between two or three drivers for that second, third position.
I'd be willing to pay up to $5 Monopoly currency just to see a fight between these two where they're not really worried about bringing the cars in one piece. I think just a basically the racing equivalent of a bare knuckle fist fight between these two would be quite interesting here in this race. But I have my data. We are going to get it. We're about to hit, there we go, 40 minutes into this race. So we have about 5 minutes left on the clock. Not very long left to go. I think, just trying to do some quick maths in my head, I believe they'll be taking the 3 to go this time by. Yeah, I think it'll be the 3 to go. Right. Spencer Retsma there. We haven't really paid attention to him. He's actually put together a pretty decent race, running in a very comfortable P3, running all by himself. He has a 4-second gap back to Sammy Hendricks in P4 and a pretty expansive gap between himself and Kyle Domark. So he is probably on him. He's probably having to listen to some kind of music just to keep himself awake. I mean, at this track, it's very labor intensive for the drivers, but I think he's having a somewhat boring race right now, just running really all by himself there in P3.
Yeah, once he got into P3, once he cleared that out, he kind of set sail and made himself a nice 4.5-second gap. I think their lap times, and he actually had a little bit slower cone to cone time than Hendricks did, but yet managed to still maintain that gap back to P4, as we see Retsma here coming down into turn 1. San Donato, we'll call it that, and will be the last time we try and pronounce any Italian tonight. So yeah, it's he's had a really good race, and he's one of those that he's had some good results during the year, and then had a couple of bad. I'm trying to remember which one was. I know he had one bad race where he kind of got caught up in somebody else's mess. So it's nice to just jump back and come out, run all the races, get him a nice podium out of it, and then get ready for the final race of the season.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this may be the, obviously the race hasn't ended yet, but if he does hold on to this position, this will be the first podium for Spencer Retsma since, I think, Season 2. So this will be his first podium of the season. A fairly bizarre way, you could say, of doing it in a race with only 5 cars, but still, a podium is a podium. I'm sure he will not be counting any sort of objections to that, so I think he'll be pretty happy if he finishes this race in P3. If you would, Josh, I think we'll finally commit sin and try and pronounce some of these corner names. So I think if we could cut back to the leader, Gregory Hovesen, right on board with him. I think he's taken the 2 to go. So this will be not very long left. This will be one of the only opportunities we have to actually do this last, I think. So we're going to be heading through the final corner here. I'm going to be peeing on my Italian heritage, shall we say. Going down the start-finish straight away, we are going to enter the very tricky first corner. It feels like it takes forever. These drivers are in about 3rd gear going through it, so it's a fairly fast, it's a medium speed, shall we say, first corner, and that corner name is San Donato, Donato. So hopefully I didn't butcher that too much. Then we're going to be heading into the first chicane, quote-unquote, section of Luco Turn 2, and then Poggio Secco. That is turn number 3. That's going to be a fairly, well, actually, it's not a long flat lap last, but it's one of the longest on this entire lap. Heading into turn 4, Materassi. We were joking before the start of this broadcast. I was actually going to say Maserati, but I managed to get it clean there. So your jinx on me, Charles, did not work.
Well done.
And we
Done,
went
sir.
through Borgio San Lorenzo. That was turn 5. Casanova and Savelli. That was turn 6 and 7. We're now heading through Arabita 1 and Arabita 2 between turns 8 and 9. I've actually been calling them 9 and 10 this entire race. I feel like a little bit of a goof. Then we're heading into turn 10, Scarperia, if I'm not mistaken, Scarperia. Then Pelagio, turn 11. Then Currentillo, that we already said this name, so the fact I'm struggling on the second time by is a little bit embarrassing. Now we're heading into turn 13 and 14. Very strange section. It would be interesting if that corner had some anti-cutting curbs. That'd be real interesting to see those drivers clobber those going through turns 13 and 14 of Biodetti 1 and 2. Then we go through the final corner, and that is turn 15 of Bucine, B-U-C-I-N, Bucine. I'm not sure. I probably ruined all of those pronunciations. I feel really bad, but we are on, I guess in Italian, it would be the Blanco flag. I'm not sure what the Italian word is for flag, but we are on the last lap here. And Gregory Hoverson, who just, I believe, set the fastest lap of the race there last time by while we were riding on board with them. Maybe my butchered Italian corner pronunciations might be Gregory Hoverson's saving grace and grabbing the fastest lap of the race he probably already had before then. But maybe that's a little bit of a nice little asset that I just brought to him there.
Or maybe he just wants to get this race over with. I mean, maybe that's the other part of that. So I will say this.
Trying to stop my pronunciations.
Yeah, exactly. I will say this. You did say Scarperia, which is the town that the racetrack is located in. So that is right outside, I guess, in the area of Florence, Italy. So I did read that earlier. So that's my factoid for the night.
It is a very good corner I was looking at, and I'm not sure if you've ever run into this, Charles, on some broadcast, but you just look at a driver's name, like before the race, you're like, okay, I know how exactly to pronounce that driver's name. You practice it a lot, and then come time for the broadcast, you just look at that driver's name and completely draw a blank. I've done that numerous times on my nearly,
I did a fill in for the Apex prototype championship just a few weeks ago, and there's 3 Greek drivers in there, and it was like, no, I'm not even going to try that. So I completely understand.
God bless the Greeks. They have a beautiful culture, a beautiful language, but their pronunciations are hellish for our English commentators here. So Gregory Hoveson going to take the checkered flag, and he is going to be your champion here in convincing fashion here for Season 3 for the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series. He takes his 5th checkered flag of the season here at Mugello. His teammate Kyle Domark finishes this race in P3, and Spencer Resma just crossing the start-finish line now, so that will be completing your podium and most of your field here in tonight's race. And then 4th place, my apologies, will be Sammy Hendricks, and that's going to be quite a long wait until we get to our last place finisher here from tonight's race. The newcomer here to the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, Jonathan Newman, finishes this race in 5th, running at your field. So that is good to Jonathan Newman for finishing the race after that spin. You know, he only really made one mistake the entire night. Of course, we had to capture it and replay it, but good for him, because sometimes it's real easy when you're 10 plus seconds down to the rest of the field to just say, you know what, I think I'm going to park the car, but he's stuck in there and finished the race. Obviously, finished 5th, which is both good. You got a top 5, and then bad, you're last. But however, he did finish the race, and we do hope he comes back, because it's always good to have some extra drivers out there, and you never can tell. May end up battling for some hardware as he goes and gets a little better during the course of his iRacing career. We have some pushing and shoving here from the Delta Sport teammates. They're just screwing around after the finish.
You know what? I think because Hoveson took such a short pit stop, he's probably out of fuel.
Actually, no, that's Domar getting pushed.
Oh, is it?
So,
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think now actually they're both
Yep.
stopped, so
You know
I think
what?
they're now both out of gas.
Both out of gas. Yep. So
Yeah. I mean, cutting it close there, you got to give them credit, even though they had a pretty expansive gap, or were basically going to finish 1-2 unless some massive disaster happened. For the both of them, they still took light on gas. I'm a little bit disappointed because I really want to see some burnouts or some donuts going on the start-finish right away, but no matter. They're still, maybe we'll see some donuts here from Spencer Retzma. I wish I had some hotkeys in iRacing just to get on the mic and say, hey, Spencer, put on a smoke show for us, buddy. Burn that Ferrari down to the ground. I think he took a little bit more fuel. I think he had the longest pit stop of anyone, so he has a lot more gas. I think maybe he's doing another lap.
I think he wants more, you know what, one more hot lap of practice, and we'll call it done.
There you go. So just, I think he had to negotiate the two Delta Sport drivers who were taking it easy. Low on gas. Ooh, a little bit weaving. Maybe he's trying to set up for a donut here. Fingers crossed he's stopped. Don't tell me he's going to... Oh, no. He toes. Oh, no. Oh, man. I just made myself look like a fool, but... Ooh, oh, no. Who does it really matter? He didn't do donuts. He just towed back to the pits. A very anticlimactic end to this race. I was expecting a smoke show there from that Ferrari and just being able to listen to that awesome Ferrari engine. But we have the results for you now from tonight's very strange race here at Mugello. Gregory Hoverson taking the win and taking the championship here from Season 3. He finishes this race in first ahead of his Delta Sport teammates. Kyle Domark finishing 2.6 seconds behind there in P2. Spencer Retzma falling back about 10.1 seconds back of your winner there in P3. Sammy Hendricks will be in fourth, and John Newman rounding out your top 5. I like the point that you mentioned there, Charles, of how John Newman should be happy about the fact he scored his first ever top 5 and his first ever start. However, he might be a little bit disappointed knowing that he finished last.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
nice little contrast there.
You have to look at the glass as half full a lot of times, right? So, you know, he's got some, you know, he got to race against some quality competition on a new circuit. I'm sure he's learned quite a bit. And so, yeah, it's always good, right? Anytime you get laps against some quality competition, you know, obviously his, you know, Hendricks, his teammate, is going to give him the business for winning the inter team battle. But that being said, you know, you're going to get a lot of that anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I think you put in a pretty good analogy there. Some describe the glass as half full, others describe it as half empty. I think the George Carlin joke runs that he describes it as being too big. So we didn't have a too big field here. Only 5 cars, as you can see how they're heading into turn 1 there at the very start of the race. A very bizarre race. We are expecting it to be different compared to all the other races just off how different this track is, but we weren't really expecting it to be that different. 5 cars taking the start here, 5 cars taking the finish as well. 100% of the cars that started finished this race, which I think is the first time we've been able to say that about any of the races this season, so that's a little bit of a plus from a very strange night of racing action. So Charles, just some final thoughts on the race that we just saw here.
I don't. No, it was good. It was good to see Mugello with live action. At least for me, I'm happy to see it. So it's you know, I got a chance to learn a little bit about the track. I saw some really quality drivers on the track racing. Yeah, you know, the finish itself was a little anticlimactic just because of the gaps between the cars. But, you know, it's always kudos to the drivers to come out and compete, and especially in a race like this. Would have been very easy, as we said, for Newman to come just say, you know what, I'm done. So hats off to all of them for finishing the race. Hats off to Hoveson for obviously a fantastic season. And hopefully, like I said, we'll get a bigger field back for Bathurst. Me personally, that would be the one I would miss because I'm just horrible at the track. And yeah, and so the only thing I would say is I feel so inadequate now looking at your guys' pictures with all the hair. So other than that, yeah, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it as always, and looking forward to the season finale.
Yeah, a little bit more of a relaxed broadcast. our producer Josh and myself sharing photos of our long hair that I've grown ever since I think May of 2021. A little bit of a story behind that. My brother adopted kids. I used to have his wife cut my hair. My sister-in-law would cut my hair, and like a week after she cut my hair last, they adopted 2 kids. So now I feel like a little bit of a dick saying, hey, could you cut my hair, please? Even though they have 2 kids to deal with, very young kids. So I kind of just let it grow out. I look more like a hobo with every passing day. But no matter, as you said, Bathurst, that's going to be a really good race here in a couple of weeks' time. Speaking of, if you'd like to tune into that broadcast here on Apex Racing TV, that'll be in 2 weeks' time on February the 21st to round off Season 3 of the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series. It will round off the 2nd season that we've covered here on Apex Racing TV, and I think that's going to be a pretty good race. Fingers crossed that we have a lot more cars on track, but if you'd like to see some more action here on Apex, you can check out some of the other series that we have coming up here. The BRSCC Winter Esports Cup will be the next broadcast here on Apex. They'll be at 2:45 tomorrow, along with the Apex Racing League Prototype Championship at Mugello. So we got 2 Mugello races coming up in one single week. That'll be a pretty good race from their 6th race of their 7th season there. That's going to be a pretty good one to watch. 2 broadcasts basically starting at the same time, so you got a lot of options here over the next few days here on Apex Racing TV. As for tonight's broadcast, I think that just about does it. As I said, if you'd like to keep up to date with everything here on Apex, you can hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, do all of that as you would. Usually I'd end these broadcasts by thanking our producer Josh for all the hard work he does behind the scenes, my co-commentator, my colleague Charles Bichelle for joining me and screwing around with me here in the commentary booth, just talking about whatever. But I think now, since I've never had a candle lit for a broadcast, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to give this an opportunity to blow out this candle to end off this broadcast, and hopefully not light my desk on fire. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night. We'll see you all again in 2 weeks' time, and hopefully in blowing out this candle, I don't burn my fingers off with a hot wax. All right, there we go, and I nearly got some smoke in my eyes.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.